Alright, hello and welcome. This is Katarian Lightning, and today I thought we'd go and take a look at something interesting, which is the various propaganda around the death of one Russian general, Igor Kirillov. So, who was Igor Kirillov? Well, Kirillov was the Russian general in charge of their missile, biological weapons, a chemical weapons program, so this includes both offensive and defensive actions. Ukraine assassinated Kirillov using an electric scooter in front of his house, so it killed him and an aide. Only those two people, by the way, so both military targets, okay? And basically, this had the Russians and the woke right, and I'm absolutely loving the fact that as a term now, basically, it had their propagandists in an absolute fit. So we're going to go take a look at their, the propaganda narrative around this guy. So now, why this guy is important from the Russian perspective is that this is the guy who was majorly pushing that whole scam about, the West and the Ukrainians had biolabs and they were going to go and use weaponized mosquitoes and weaponized birds to go and spread, biological weapons against the Russian military, right? So basically, this is a lie, right? That the Russian propagandists and the various different Western allies, this woke right crowd, went and absolutely took up in arms and said, oh yes, we believe in all of this, right? And the reason I'm going to be going and critiquing this video from Alex Jones in particular is because he has the highest number of views on this subject, so 35.8 million views, all right? And basically, you're going to know the entire way this thing is framed, okay? Alex Jones, breaking. Russian general who told the world about the Ukrainian/US-backed bioweapons labs assassinated in Russia. So, for starters, and I'm going to be talking about this more later on, right? For starters, a biological lab, right? So these are the high-level biological labs of, level 3, level 4 that we're talking about here, right? These are things that many universities have, and this is actually the most common place where you're going to go and find a high-level biological lab, right? These are not weaponized labs. These are not labs that are set up to go and develop various different, biological weapons, right? These are labs that are set up to go and study what is considered to be dangerous biological matter, so that is bacteria, viruses, right? And these are labs that require a high degree of containment, proper facilities, proper security measures, right? So the point is that this is what high-level biological labs are about. They're not about developing biological weapons. They're about studying various different biological materials, usually in order to go and develop a cure for them or a counter to them, right? So the point is that all that the Russians did is they went and said, these are the Ukrainian places that have level 3 and level 4 biological labs, right? And they're going and saying, these are all weapons labs, right? They're just weapons labs, right? They're all for developing biological weapons. And they did this at the time when, of course, the this whole woke right? We're still promoting social distance around, again, like the whole COVID era, right? Which we'll talk more about that later on, okay? But the point is that Russia saw that, there's a lot of dissatisfaction in the West over this. Ergo, we're going to go and take this narrative and we're going to go and use it to go and support our war in Ukraine, to generate, Western supporters for our war in Ukraine. When the reality is, we all know, right? COVID was from China. It was from Wuhan. We know that it escaped from the Wuhan laboratory, right? Like, that was a high-level facility, right? That was itself likely engaged in developing some sort of biological weapon. Like, that's because, again, like in China, yes, China would be the sort of place that would develop a biological weapon. It would backfire on it, of course, because of course it would, and this is why people, why countries don't develop biological weapons, because you can no longer count on something to stay in one part of the world. It will eventually find its way back to you in time. So basically, that is what they did. And of course, the framing, this is the woke right, which again, the woke right, just like the woke left, the entire point of what they promote is to cause social dissatisfaction and social distance, right? To get you to distrust the society that you live in. And so in the case of the woke right, they basically want to go and say, oh, the people who control the West are all globalists, and your globalist societies, and they're all untrustworthy, and blah blah blah, and that thus anyone who is joined up with them, like the Ukrainians, oh, they're also bad. Anyone who's opposed to them, like the Russians, are good, right? So basically, it's the same sort of mindset that you've seen going around ever since society became ideological, right? Which is about in the 1900s, 20th century. Before that, even to when back in the days when Rome was falling and that sort of thing, there was a lot of this sort of ideologicalization of society going on that results in social polarization. But they're all trying to bring it back. They're like the late stage version of it, you could say. But anyways, so the framing is, remember, he is a very high ranked general, right? Igor Kirillov, right? And they're going to frame it as an assassination, okay? When the reality is, again, this is a military target, very high ranking general. Military generals are absolutely fair go in a war. And yeah, so they were absolutely right to go and kill him. Call it whatever you want. NATO/Ukraine are the prime suspects. Well, for starters, Ukraine has already said, we did it, right? We got this guy. Because, again, Ukraine said, yeah, he's a war criminal. We're going to go again. But then Alex Jones immediately frames them as the suspects, right? So immediately goes and presents it as a crime, right? That's what a suspect is, something that is involved in a crime. As Russia says it will retaliate, so this is more of his fear-based propaganda. I've noticed this, right? Where basically they need to go and be scared. So in this case, they want you to go and be scared of World War III and nuclear weapons, etc., etc. And ergo, you should go and compromise and bow to the aggressor, right? Which is Russia. And yep, they then go and they've been basically calling this like an escalation, etc., etc. So we're going to go watch this video, but first I want to go and share with you the various different narratives around this general, and then we're going to go and watch through this video. And again, I'm going to be doing this blind. This is my first go through with the video, so I'll be experiencing it for the first time with all of you. So here we are at some screenshots that I've taken just so we can just see that this is a general narrative that they've been spraying for a while. So here we see, for example, this is from December 18th, 2024, and this is a known propaganda account called Clandestine on X. So here we have 1.4 million views. Again, these are being hyper upped by bots, so that's how they get these sorts of numbers. Here you see that Igor Kirillov alleged that the U.S. had plans to manufacture another biological crisis. They killed this guy yesterday, right? So that's going to be start for the narrative. Here you see in September 10th, 2023, another propaganda account, Jackson Hinkle, went and goes and alleges that America has prepared drones inside which there are thousands of mosquitoes, which hold all kinds of infectious diseases, and the mosquitoes kill soldiers. So note this, right? This is mosquitoes being claimed as the vector, which again, do I need to specify that you can't go and control a mosquito? So if a mosquito gets out, it has tons and tons of infectious diseases in it, it's very quickly going to go and infect your soldiers. And frankly, you're probably going to go and just give, mosquitoes are going to go and transfer that to anyone they go and get in contact with, right? So this is, again, another absurd claim, but one that is being made, and of course one that, like you can see, gets 700,000 views, which again, it's being boosted by propaganda, but still. Here we have a guy who is talking about there was a rally for this guy in Genoa, Italy, right? And you'll notice that they immediately go to this whole terrorist attack thing, right? Where it's like, again, it's a general. It's a valid target in war. Like, soldiers are valid targets in war. Like, does that need to be specified? Yeah. The demonstrators oppose the EU and NATO support for terrorism and Nazi Ukraine. Yep. See, again, just lies after lies, right? And this is just the tip of the iceberg, right? So, yeah. Again, another claim that U.S. and Big Pharma ruled the world by manufacturing biological crises. Well, again, China was the one that did it. And if you go and look at, remember, Italy was the first major Western country, right, to go and follow China's whole lockdown pattern. And if you go and look at the guy who did that, like the medical doctor who was put there to do that, well, you find out very quickly that he is a Chinese Communist Party sympathizer, right? Like, he admits this in his own book. This was talked about, in certain circles, right? Like, these are the sort of things that make mainstream news, right? But that's a very important thing. Like, I know in Canada, like, we had a literal Chinese woman, right, who's like literally was the one who was hyper advocating for this stuff, right? And the point is, like, to manufacture, dissidents, right? Where it's like, and then suddenly when you had the Floyd, the whole Floyd protests and riots going on, right? Well, suddenly then the medical professionals are out there, championing it and saying, "Oh, let's tell you why, going out and protesting on the streets is absolutely fine," and swarming together in mass closed groups. It's like, right? So, point being that a lot of the absurdity that you saw around that time period, it was absurdity, right? Because you go look at what the Chinese are doing, and they're literally like trying to sterilize streets from viruses. And I remind you again, viruses, like, they live outside of the body for like 15 to 20 minutes. Like, these aren't things that survive outside of the human body. And then China's going to walking around like literally mass sterilizing streets. It's like, so there's so much performative art, right? It's a performance that is going on where it's like, we're going and telling you to go and believe certain things, right? And that's sort of what's being looked at, and then it's like people are like, "Oh, it's all the West, right? It's all the West that's doing that." Well, it's like, it's blatantly obvious that there are mass sympathetic factors here. They're just trying to go and, again, you take something that is a crisis, right? Which is, there's a dangerous virus, a dangerous pathogen that's going around. It's mostly dangerous for the elderly, right? Like, that's 90% of the people that are dying from corona, right? So they're taking that, and then they're going and saying, well, how can we go and use this to go and create social dissatisfaction? And so that was sort of what the goal of certain forces, what that was. And then, of course, because that has left a deep imprint in a lot of people, right, that social dissatisfaction, well, that they can go and continue to go and use these sorts of narratives to go and promote it. And that's essentially what you're dealing with this whole issue here. So, which is just to say, again, like, who are the ones who used this whole crisis to their advantage, right? Well, in China, you saw that it was being used to go and, basically, Xi used it to go and punish the cities that were supportive of his political enemies, right? Like, that's why Shanghai got like massively locked down for such a long period of time, and some other areas were like, oh, you're only going to be minorly locked down, right? So it was being used as a political weapon, like that. Like, my initial thinking on even hearing the whole thing was that, oh, China's probably just using it as an excuse to go and eliminate a bunch of their political dissidents. So that was, of course, one of the things that they were doing. But anyways, so that's all just to say that, again, this whole narrative that's sprung up around it, they just want to go and keep it going. And of course, you shouldn't let them, right? Like, you should go and say that, there was an issue at the time, right? But it was also very poorly handled, and the medical establishment was running around like chickens with their heads cut off, right? That's just the reality of the situation, that nobody really had any clue about what to do, and that was a problem. So, anyways. And by the way, this guy here, right? So we saw him going and promoting that claim about the thing in Genoa. Well, interesting enough, there are a bunch of bot accounts here that are actually going and also going and repeating that talk about, the rally in Genoa, Italy, right? So, yeah. yeah, helped their country during the height of COVID-19. Again, it's like, this is just another lie, right? Another lie. They placed the EU flag on the ground and trampled it. Yep, that figures. So, yeah, by the way, Italy, for the record, still has a big communist problem, right? And that's what you're seeing here, like communists. Also Russian expats, right? Yep. Yep, and see, look at this. Like, literally almost word for word, right? Yep. Literally, right? 2 accounts, word for word. Like, you're seeing this, right? Like, a rally is held in Genoa, Italy in memory of blah, 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 who died in the terrorist attack in Moscow. Yeah. So that sense is exactly correct. And even with a little Italian flag, right? Demonstrators also spoke out against EU and NATO support for terrorism. Demonstrators also spoke out against EU and NATO support for terrorism. They laid the EU flag on the ground and trampled it. They placed the EU flag on the ground and trampled it. See what I'm talking about? Like literally just one word removed. Like, literally lazy, right? Literally that lazy. But anyways, this is how bot accounts go and do it. All right. And we have Mr. Guns and Gear, right? So this is American or allegedly American, who knows, right? Was he General Igor Kirillov, head of Russia's Chemical and Biological Defense Force, killed because he exposed biolabs around the world and the Soros/Democrat network funding them? Again, it's like, once more, like, just, yeah, it's like, you see, this is what, again, it's what ignorance does, right? What ignorance does. And they've submitted this sort of crap to the UN multiple times, right? Like, nobody at the UN has gone and followed up on it, which is, like, a bit surprising, I guess, because, you know, being how dumb the UN oftentimes is. But anyways, we are an organization dedicated to restoring the civil rights of Americans by going and apparently promoting Russian propagandists. That's interesting, right? So again, woke right? And of course, as with most of these types, like, you don't even know if these are Americans or what they are, right? Ignorance, the root and stem of all evil. If you're curious why Igor Kirillov was just assassinated, watch this video. Blah, blah, blah. Manufacturing biological crises, right? Again, a reminder, like, the vast majority of pathogens recently haven't originated in the U.S., right? Like, they've either been in China, we've had a few in Mexico, like, again, so just, anyways, yeah, that's ironic, isn't it? Transparency is key to building a healthier society, and then you just lie about stuff. So anyways, he was awarded the title of Hero of Russia posthumously. Yep, that figures. That figures. Yep, stand with Russia, free Palestine, of course. Of course. Pepe Escobar, who of course is the propagandist journalist who describes himself as a Eurasia-wide nomad geopolitical analyst. Oh boy. And this is from this is the Russian spokesperson for their government, Maria Zakharova, on Kirillov. Lieutenant General of the Russian Armed Forces, RBZ Igor Kirillov, has been systematically exposing the crimes of the Anglo-Saxons for many years with facts in hand. NATO provocations with chemical weapons in Syria, British manipulations with prohibited chemical substances, and provocations in Salisbury and Amesbury, the deadly activities of American biolabs in Ukraine, and much more. He worked fearlessly. He did not hide behind people's backs. And meanwhile, remember, their ally, Assad, is the one who has been using chemical weapons against civilians, and of course, Russia just decides, oh, we're going to go and use chemical weapons in warfare too, right? And of course, anytime, like, this word Anglo-Saxons is, like, I pointed out this out before, like, again, reality is that go look at English genetics, like, they're literally 75% Britain on the paternal side, they're 88% Britain on the maternal side, and you also can't actually tell an Anglo-Saxon apart from a Norman or a Dane. So it's like, just, like, the only reason Anglo-Saxon ever became a thing in the modern era, right, is just simply because there was the German no, the German monarchy, right, in England, right, in the UK. And it's like people just want to go and identify with their monarchy, or at least back in that time they did, right? Nowadays, it's nobody cares, right? Nobody really cares about the monarchy. But anyways, back then, people wanted to go and identify with their monarchy. So, with the German nobles, and it's like, oh, we're now suddenly going to emphasize the Anglo-Saxon part of the English to go and emphasize that connection to Germany, right? That actually becomes relatively undesirable during the time period of World War I and World War II, which is why they had to go and do things like call the Germans Huns and that sort of thing, which is obviously ridiculous. Like the Hunnic influence is like way under 1% in those areas, right? Like it's like you occasionally get a guy or a woman who has Hunnic ancestry, but it's like it doesn't exist basically, right? But anyways, so and then like this is also why, for example, like in the Elizabethan era, right, when the British are starting the empire, it's called the British Empire, right, because the Tudor family is from Wales, right, originally. And so the Tudors have a British connection, not a Germanic connection. And so what's emphasized is the Britishness of the people of the UK, right? So anyways, that's just to say that this term is a propaganda term, and it's just something that they've liked to go throw around. But again, it just goes and shows that they have no understanding of the people that they're talking about, right? No understanding. BRICS News, again, 1.1 million. This, of course, is going to be a heavily bought account again. And also, again, George Soros is not a Western patriot. Like, George Soros doesn't even like the West, right? Like, George Soros is just like one of these hyper progressive types, and again, he's been caught funding tons and tons of anti-Western activities. Like he's been caught funding law of the Palestinian movement, etc., etc. So yeah, he's not pro-Western. Like he'd only be pro-Western if the entire West was like hyper pro-progressive, and again, it's not really. So just he's an ideologue, not an actual he's an ideologue that's good at business is essentially what George Soros is. But again, he's not the only one. He's just the one that gets thrown around, and named a lot, but he's not the only one. And there are others, that, of course, that fund different stuff. So even, for example, like Jeff Bezos, his wife, for example, like she's funded, oh gosh, I think she's like committed like 8 times the amount of money to progressive organizations that George Soros has as his entire bank account. So that just gives you an idea of, again, the scale of these sorts of things, right? And of course, you have others that are, again, like funding other things, right? Like you have right-wing business types, et cetera, et cetera. So anyways, right. Note this, so this is from a Western propaganda account called DD Geopolitics, and they were just quoting the Russian spokeswoman. Note this, blessed memory, the kingdom of heaven. Okay, again, it's like this whole religious idea that they want to go and associate themselves with, this whole Christian idea, like this end stage Christianity, basically, right, where it's like you don't even really care about theology or anything, you just want to go and use it as a political tool, which again, Christianity's basically been moving that direction ever since it was founded, right? Like, I'm trying to think, it was maybe 100 years after Christianity got founded that started to really just be a political tool, and it's basically been that ever since. So it's like a political tool with a religious veneer. Of course, you have the old non-monotheistic Arabic Christianity and the Arabic Peninsula, which just became Islam, right? That's how you get Muhammad in that. So. And that was just explicitly political too. So basically, it's all, again, it's just all political manipulation that wants to go and, guilt him. Basically, wants people to have a guilt complex, and then that way they can go and manipulate you, go and give them power. That's essentially what's become. Was always that behind the scenes, but anyways. Spetsnaz 007, who's again, this is a Nigerian propagandist. So, yep. Again, repeating the same thing. I could go on and on. This is an English propagandist who is once more talking about giving full honors to this guy, Igor Kirillov. Yep. And again, think for yourself, right? Like that. Like, these guys always go and tell you this. Like it's like, oh, think for yourself. The narrative should defy, facts should defy the narrative, etc., etc. And it's like, they just all have these false narratives that they want you to go and believe, right? Yep. Yeah, Sputnik India, right? Douglas McGregor, who, again, this is a former U.S. colonel, a reminder, like a guy who was heavily participated in some of the wars in Iraq, right? Like, just then hyper turns on his country and then just goes and starts propaganda against them. Like, probably one of the prime examples of a woke right guy, right? Like, just... And he, of all people, should know that killing a general wartime is an entirely valid target, right? Like... But he knows that, by the way. He knows that. He's just going and repeating a propaganda line. So, anyways... Yep. And here's the allegations that the U.S. were the ones that orchestrated it, blah, blah, blah. Yep. And here's another, this is a Eurasianist propagandist guy, so Thomas Valinen, right? Serious provocation. There's no moral left in the current U.S. admin, right? And then here we have the Hunter Biden stuff coming again. Oh, likely gave the go-ahead to protect his son, to escalate, blah, blah, blah. So that is enough of all that garbage. So, and here we're going to get into the Primo example, because this is, from what I can tell, the guy who has the most views on the subject. So Alex Jones with 35.8 million views, which, again, this is going to be heavily botted, right? And, of course... By the way that X works, like, you don't have to go and click into someone's post to actually count for a view. You just have to scroll past down the timeline. Alex Jones having the most views. This is going to be the post that people are seeing. And that's kind of important. That's one of the reasons why I'm talking about this. So, basically, yep, this is Alex Jones, and he's going to be spreading propaganda. We're going to see what he's talking about.
It is Wednesday, December 18th, 2024. I'm your host, Alex Jones. We're only 33 days out from the inauguration of President Trump, and the globalist deep state is in high gear trying to destabilize our planet.
So again, immediately just goes and says, oh, the American establishment is trying to go and destabilize the planet, etc., etc., etc. Well, it's like, everybody, you're like, who is engaged in the wars currently, right? Russia is currently engaged in the wars, right? Russia is the one that's destabilizing a whole bunch of parts of the planet. Then you have China, who's going and constantly throwing out provocations against Taiwan. Venezuela, right? Throwing provocations out against Guyana, right? It's like, so who is the ones that are doing the destabilizing? And they have, like, these people that are spreading narratives that are designed to go and create angst in people inside of various different countries. They're trying to go and meddle around with people, right? You have, they're trying to go and switch entire political systems, like they're doing in Georgia, right? Where it's like, oh, you have to go and, be with us. We're going to go and ban everyone who's an opposition. You had them trying to go and get a literal fascist guy in to Romania, which, by the way, all these woke right guys, like Donald Trump Jr., right? They went and supported that guy in Romania. Charlie Kirk did as well. So it's like, just this whole ridiculousness of this whole thing, right? But anyways, they just want to go and claim that. Pow! And that is what, by the way, a scooter bomb goes, it looks like, right? Boom.
Top Russian General Igor Kirillov.
And nice little switch in the resolution there, by the way.
Kirillov, the head of their chemical, biological, radiological, weapons, defense, and offensive programs.
Yeah, offensive. That little term, right? Right? So this is literally the guy who, again, He's literally a war criminal. He's literally the one who's been greatly responsible for using missiles in the way that they've been used in Ukraine, right? Again, targeting civilians. He's used chemical weapons. Like, again, this is a war criminal. And he, depending on how long this guy's been in power, right? Like, he could even have been the one who, was in when Assad was using those chemical weapons. Like, could have been the one who's going like, oh, you should go and be brutal, right? Remember, that's what the Russians did in Syria. They're like, oh, Assad, you should go and be as brutal as possible. Like, you should go and, bomb civilian targets. You should go and do everything. Like, you should go and use, randomized artillery strikes on cities. Like, you should be absolutely brutal, and that's how you should go and conduct warfare, right? That's what they're like. Again, this is what war criminals look like fascistic war criminals. So this is, again, like all this moral crap that they're throwing out, like they're literally no different than, Teutonic Knights, right? Like, just let's go and, start up a crusade, and we're going to just go and kill a bunch of people in their villages, and we're just going to go call it, holy and righteous for our, great cause. And then, and what do? You go look at behind the scenes. Oh, they're starting to go and recruit, literally everyone with murderous intent in Europe, like everyone who has, a criminal past. Like, again, that's the old Teutonic Knights. That's what Russia is like in modern times. So that's the great comparison there.
Who has been extremely critical of the West biological weapon program that's now big.
It's not a biological weapon program. It's biological defense program, biological research program. So immediately there, you'll notice that the framing, right? So immediately it's like, oh, it's a weapons program, right? Like, again, the reason why the vast majority of countries have biological research labs is for biological defense. It's not for, like, to develop bioweapons, because bioweapons aren't even a good weapon, right? Like, they're simply not a good weapon because they will literally, again, the world is globally connected nowadays, right? So if you go and hit one place with a bioweapon, well, then it's going to go and spread, and it'll eventually come back to you, right? Like, even if you go and, target a place across the planet, it's still going to go and come back to you, and that's just the reality of the situation.
Been confirmed in Congress to have been going on inside of Ukraine.
Once more, remember, this is not what was happening. Remember, some of the funding, and the U.S. has funded, again, biological research around Europe, right? And some of that was in Ukraine. And it's like, again, it's not being funded for a weapons program. Like, that's just
illegally, because it was illegal.
Yeah, it's not illegal. Do I need to tell you why the U.S. government can just go and fund foreign places? Like, again, it's not illegal to go and do that.
Legal inside the United States.
No, what was being done in China would be illegal in the U.S., right? I believe the gain of function is what was being referred to, right? So it's like when you go and ask what was happening in China, because again, what's happening in Ukraine is not gain of function, or in other words, to make the virus more potent, right? Like, that's what the Chinese were doing in Wuhan, and that's what backfired in their faces, was literally gain of function. And you're not supposed to go and make viruses more potent in places like the U.S., at least not without very high authorization, right?
And so Obama fired it up during his first administration over there.
Which, by the way, Obama was, a reminder, the guy who gave away Crimea, right? And who gave away parts of Georgia and didn't go and confront the Russians about that. He just let them have it. He let them have, again, Luhansk, Donetsk. He let them have, a lot of these parts, right? Again, so if you're pointing to that, oh, Obama is pro-Ukrainian. No, Obama was not pro-Ukrainian. Obama was, I don't even know how you want to go and describe a guy like Obama. Like, I don't know. No, I wouldn't say he's like pro-Russian, but it's also like he's like part of this whole democratic idea that, oh, we have to have peace at any cost. And that's exactly the sort of mindset that had them trying to go and piece out the U.S. Civil War, like literally 1 year before Like, literally go look up the U.S. Democratic Party convention, like 1 year before the U.S. Civil War ended. Like, they were literally trying to go peace out the Confederacy. Like, that is the same sort of mindset that we're getting into here, right? And it's been a big problem with some parts of the party throughout their history. Hey, I'm not trying to go make this about Democrats versus Republicans, because, again, like, Democrats have also been, remember, very strong at certain parts of their history, right? Like during World War One, World War Two, they were very strong against different powers, but they weren't strong enough, though. Like World War One should have ended, frankly, with a mass push into Germany. Like, that was what Pershing was trying, right? So you would have ended up with a very demilitarized Germany, right? It could argue for a better participation in the Russian Civil War, right? That would have ended without, a communist victory. Again, like, I know the white Russians have their own problems, right? But it's a more workable situation. Like, they had more, there were some moderates in that group too, so that you could have worked with there. World War II didn't end up like giving Eastern Europe to the Soviets. That wasn't an acceptable, solution. It's obvious now that wasn't acceptable. But anyways, so there were problems even with the handling of those. But the point is that if you go into look in the modern day, Obama gave away the Republic of Crimea here and 2 parts of Georgia, right? And these 2 parts of Ukraine, right? That were kind of like battle zones. Ukraine had part of them, right? But anyways, that's the point. So no, Obama was not a good person for Ukraine. Nobody in Ukraine likes Obama. Like, that's just the reality of the situation. Just not good. Trump kind of did better for Ukraine in that he gave them a number of weapon systems. Then basically the reason why Russia wasn't able to go and steamroll through Ukraine was because Ukraine actually had, again, a developed army, right? So anyways, but even now to this day, right, like, the Democrats have not been very good to Ukraine. Like, they've been slow funneling weapons through. And again, this is the biggest issue recently has been that they had this ridiculous show and tell where they wanted to go and say, oh, Ukraine can't strike into Russia with our weapon systems. And then the U.S. was also running interference with, like, you can't go and strike in with French and British weapon systems either, or otherwise we're not going to go and support you, right? So again, it's like, what is your perspective in Ukraine, right? It's like, are you trying to go for the win, or are you just trying to go for, like, some weird sort of draw? It's like, what are you doing in Ukraine? Like, do you even have an idea of what you're doing anymore? And again, this is against their initial strong weapons push, right, where they were giving that. But nowadays, it's like, who had to go and get all the weapon shells for Ukraine, right? The artillery shells. It had, like, Czechia. Like, Czechia, like, little Czechia has to be the one that goes and organizes artillery shells for Ukraine. And they have to go and, scramble them together from all around the world, right? Like, so these countries like Germany and the U.S., they have not been good to Ukraine. Like, they've been slow trickling in weapon systems, right? And they've continued to have this addiction to Russian gas and natural gas. It's like, so point being that there have been a lot of problems in how Europe has handled this, and Obama was not good for Ukraine. So
there, and this Russian general came out 2 years ago with all the documents and exposed.
Again, forged documents, right? Like, they're documents that were really obviously forged. And like, do I need to tell you that it's really easy to forge a document, except to do it actually convincingly, you have to be really in the know, and it was a pretty sloppy forgery. So anyways, but again, guys like Alex Jones, they just want to go and believe the worst about the West, right? And so that's why they're always going to go and take these sorts of positions.
How the United States and other NATO countries were building all these high-level bioweapon labs over the past few decade plus in Russia, and then Congress asked Victoria Nuland and others about it, and they had to admit it.
Does Ukraine have chemical or biological weapons?
Ukraine has biological research facilities, which, in fact, we are now quite concerned Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of. So we are working with the Ukrainians on how they can prevent any of those research materials from falling into the hands of Russian forces should they approach.
I'm sure you're...
And just note that, right? Again, it's like, like, do I need to tell you, like, again, like, look at that. Like, this is what Alex Jones is using as, like, his evidence. It's like, again, it's not evidence. Like, if you just listen to what she said they have research facilities. They literally have facilities. Yeah, do I need to tell you that, like, research facilities, they have, you know, they have viruses, they have bacteria on hand. And again, stuff like that, if it leaks out, is dangerous. And that's what they're talking about, right? It's like, because again, like, the Russians, they were reckless, right? Like, you go and look at what they were doing. Like, literally, Russians, they went to the Red Forest and they started digging trenches. And the Red Forest, for those who don't know, is in the Chernobyl region, so, which has massive amounts of radiation that is just barely underneath the surface of the ground, and the Russians were digging trenches in the Red Forest area, right? Certain commanders. So those troops all have cancer now. Like, this is just the sort of thing that you see them doing. So yeah, this was a valid concern. That's like, oh, yeah, that they could get their hands on biological weapons, right? On things that, well, more accurately, could be weaponized into biological weapons if you want to go and develop them. And the point is that just as the labs, like the samples at labs, like, there's not enough there to actually be like a biological weapon, right? The point is that you could go and, however, turn that into a biological weapon if you went and hyper-manufactured them. So that's a deal going on here. But again, people like Alex Jones just want to go and believe the worst about these people. And meanwhile, that's while, again, the Russians use chemical weapons. Like, the Chinese were developing biological weapons. Like, is there any doubt that these are the countries that would do that sort of thing, that would be stupid enough to authorize that? Again, China, like, they wanted to go and have that, right? Like, they wanted to have biological weapons on hand, and that's what ended up happening in Wuhan. Like, just boom.
You're aware that the Russian propaganda groups are already putting out there all kinds of information about how they've uncovered a plot by the Ukrainians to release biological weapons in the country, and with NATO's coordination. If there's a biological...
No, not what he said. Propaganda, right? Like, Rubio was like, yeah, this is propaganda that the Russians are putting out. So, like, these clips aren't proving what you think they are. Like what Jones thinks they are. So it's like,
biological or chemical weapon incident or attack inside of Ukraine. Is there any doubt in your mind that 100% it would be the Russians that would be behind it?
There is no doubt in my mind, Senator, and it is classic Russian technique to blame on the other guy what they're planning to do themselves.
After the corporate...
Do you see what I mean? Like, that entire exchange proves, like, it literally proved the opposite. It's like, they have biological research facilities, and if you were going to go and have, again, like, what's more, like, you have to understand, like, the scale, right, that's being of a virus or a bacteria that's being kept at a biological facility, right? It's not going to be anywhere near the point to which you would need if you were going to go and launch an actual attack on people. Like, for that, oh gosh, you need a ton, right? Like, you need enough that you could infect, like, let's see, either the waters. Well, it's the water supply, right? Like, let's be real here. It's the water supply that you'd be going for, right? Which would require pretty extensive infiltration, right? It requires you to go and, you'd have to get past the water purification systems, because I don't think a virus is going to last through a lot of the modern water day purification techniques, right? Like, there's a lot that goes into water purification, but basically, you have to have enough that you can go and dump it in a water system, right? Like, the proposed vectors that the Russians were suggesting, like mosquitoes and birds, like, those simply aren't things that can happen. So That's the point, though, right? Like they're throwing stuff out there. They're relying on the fact that these conspiracy theorist types will not actually be critical thinkers. Like these conspiracy types, right? Like they claim to be, critical thinkers because, we're contrarians, we're dissidents, etc., etc., and then they go and fall for, just other people's propaganda, right? Just ridiculous stuff. And like I said, that clip didn't prove anything, so we'll continue.
Media and the fact checkers had tried to deny it.
Yeah, there's nothing to deny there. They literally reported on what happened. Like that, you literally heard that exchange, right? Like literally they said there's no weaponization of bacteria or viruses in Ukraine, right? There were research facilities, and then the concern is if the Russians go and get their hands on that material at those facilities, that could then be weaponized, right? So it's like, again, it would still need like active breeding, active development, right, to even go weaponize it. But if you have a sample, you can't go and do that sort of thing, right? So that's the problem. And these guys, they don't know anything about, like guys like Alex Jones, they know absolutely nothing about biological research, right? Like probably don't even know what an actual research facility is looking like. They're thinking of like something like a Resident Evil weapons facility, right? Where it's like you have, like a massive building full of, test tubes, et cetera, et cetera. When it's like, again, it's just going to be like research labs at, universities and that sort of thing. Again, like very highly secured places that the point is that you don't want samples breaking out because, again, these places, they keep active samples of stuff because they have to go and research it. But anyways, yeah, you don't want that stuff getting in the hands of bad actors, which is why they're, again, very heavily secured. So anyways.
And so he was one of the top targets of NATO through their proxy force, the Ukrainians. And yes.
Again, just ridiculous, right? Ridiculous stuff.
Yesterday, as he walked out of his apartment, a moped, a scooter was filled with plastic explosives and killed him and his aide. So this is another massive escalation of the war. The Russians say it's...
Again, it's a war. Which, by the way, Alex Jones, calling it a war is, may I remind you, a strict violation of the request of Vladimir Putin, who insists that the pronouns of this happen to be the special military operation. He will throw you in prison should you go and violate that. So remember, it's a special military operation, not a war. But anyways, be more serious. Again, military general and his aide, this is not an invalid target in a war. This is a valid target. I mean, frankly, even, if you want to talk about, government guys in wars are targets, a lot of things are targets. The point is just civilians aren't targets, but, again, a lot of, anything military-related is a target in a war zone. It doesn't matter how it happens. If a guy, were to shoot both of them, right, that's a valid, act. It's and these leaderships guys, they don't get to hide behind territory and say, oh, we're just immune from being attacked, and anyone who attacks us, oh, it's a crime, right? No, if you participate in an active war, you can get targeted as a general. That's just how it is. As a matter of fact, historically speaking, the prime target was actually the leadership guy, right? Because if you take out the king, well, you win the game, right? That's just how it goes, right?
It's a huge escalation.
And again, all this talk of escalation, it's Alex Jones doesn't hold that's an escalation that, Russia goes and missiles Ukraine every single day, kills civilians every single day, hits hospitals, hits apartment complexes. None of this goes and bothers Alex Jones because, again, Alex Jones just goes and advocates for the guys he likes, his side, right? He doesn't care about actually any sort of, universal morality. He's a supremacist moralist, right? That's been my all these woke guys, woke right guys, well, the woke left guys as well, they're all various different forms of supremacist moralism, where they basically hold that one rule applies to the guys that they like and another to the guys they don't like. In this case, so for example, if a Ukrainian general had this happen to him, well, Alex Jones would have been absolutely fine with that, right? But now because it's a Russian general, well, that's absolutely terrible, right? So it's like, you have to, according to guys like Alex Jones, Ukraine should have just, surrendered when the Russians invaded, right? Because, well, the Russians are the good guys, ergo Ukrainians are the bad guys, ergo Russians should just be able to go and punch the Ukrainians in the face whenever they desire, and the Ukrainians should just have to go and accept it because they're the bad guys, right? Like, that's the mindset here. So it's, again, this isn't how any sort of life on the planet that has ever existed has acted, and what people have been brainwashed into believing for the sake of their little moralism is just ridiculous.
You're retaliating somehow, but that's what happens when you expose the globalists.
Yeah, and immediately goes and says that that's what the deal is. Not that this guy, again, is in charge of their nuclear missiles and chemical weapons, right? Like, just...
And their big bioweapons programs. Here's a short clip of him with subtitles on Russian TV.
Yeah, so this is going to be, again, just uncritically repeats all sorts of propaganda. Again, again, a reminder, the Russians have done nothing throughout their existence to go and warrant this sort of faith being trusted in them, right? Like, they were known, like, Alex Jones is well aware that the communists put out mass propaganda in the Cold War era, and even before that against the West. Like, he is well aware of this. Like, his ilk, the woke right, they even love calling their opponents Marxists and that sort of thing, whether or not that is even correct terminology, right? But for some reason now they're like, oh, apparently the Russians have gone and, they are no longer Marxists, they're no longer communists, despite the fact that, they go and put up massive amounts of they go and hyper promote communist symbols. They go and promote guys like Stalin and Lenin. And really, again, like I've just pointed out, what's happened is they've just gone and combined communism and fascism together, which means that they basically go and use communist propaganda techniques, dialectics, that sort of thing. And they go and combine that with the sort of fascistic sort of language that guys like Alex Jones like talk about Christianity and, we're anti-globalist, etc., etc. Well, for starters, like, the concept that you could even be we'll talk about, like, different forms of, like, globalism, what that could actually mean, but basically their form of being anti-globalist is just being imperialists, and, like, they have Russians run around everywhere. They go, like, they're involved in Africa. Like, they had, like, just the number of places, like, Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Honduras. Like, that's in the Americas that they go and run around and mess around in. So they were messing around in Syria. So, like, again, like, how is this the act of an anti-globalist? Like, or someone who is unconcerned about globalism? Like, you're literally running around all around the world trying to go and get together these various different groups. You literally have troops all around the world. It's like, so no, Russia is not an anti-globalist power. China is not an anti-globalist power. These are actually China especially is the one that has built itself up based on globalism, right? Again, this is like this whole talk about globalism, like, we have to understand that what they mean by it is just something that is very apart from anything that the Western world is talking about, right? Like, the Western world, it's mostly a focus on commercial trade. I'd say, like, global commercial trade. That's oftentimes the biggest thing. And there are certain people in the West that are, like, ideological and that they have aspirations for various different global systems. But even then, like I pointed out, the reality is simply that the primary vector of global interaction, like the UN and the World Health Organization, a number of others like these. Like, the reality is that these are places that aren't particularly pro-Western. Like, they're, if anything, leaning way more into like the Russia and China propaganda axis. So that's something we've recognized for a while. But of course, all of this goes by, someone like Alex Jones, who just wants to go and use, globalist as a slang term.
Last year, talking about these issues and more. This is a huge broadcast today with myself, Mike Adams, and some massive guests he's got. As
also not an accurate person. Oh, gosh.
Well as Chase Geyser and others. I'll be back with more big reports. But again, the war just continues to escalate. With pray for peace and that we don't end up.
What does that peace mean? Like, seriously, what does that peace mean? It's like, and note that head of a unit defending against biological attacks. No, like, again, like, literally, that's the framing, right? He's a defender, right? Defender. When the reality is, again, he's an aggressor, right? Like, the vast majority, like, nobody who has recently attacked Russia with biological weapons, like, nobody who has attacked Russia, Russia with nuclear weapons, nobody who has attacked Russia with chemical weapons, nobody who has Russia attacked with these sort of weapon systems, Ukraine, Syrians, so no, he's an aggressor, right? Yeah, his department is in defense as well, but yeah, his actual action has been as an aggressor, so just ridiculous stuff. And by the way, know how targeted this is. Like, there's none of this BS about, we're going to go and hit somebody and there's going to be, like, 50 civilian casualties to go and get the guy we want. Like, just two guys, both involved in the military, die, right? Like,
all dying in thermonuclear war.
Yeah, there you go. And again, fear-mongering, right? Like, that's what another big trait of the new right, the woke right, that I've noted. It's fear-mongering. But if you want to go and hear just some of my takes on that, like, go to the first episode where I was talking about Tenet. Okay, that's where I had a big discussion about what the woke right is. I should have really tossed in a bit more about mythology and that sort of thing, like social mythos. But anyways, it's a pretty good overview apart from that.
Рост заболеваемости нехарактерными инфекциями отмечен в данный момент в ряде стран. И то есть...
Yeah, and you want to know what's causing that? Is simply put that there is... Yeah, immediately go and claim American biologist. Oh, here's an idea. What was historically limited to one place in the world is no longer limited to one place in the world, because global commerce means that it is moving from place to place to place to place to place, right? So what happens in one part of the world no longer stays in one part of the world, unless you're like a type who wants to go and immediately isolate yourself when things happen, right? So if there has been a uptick of these sorts of things, which again is like, that's debatable, right? There's always been plagues and that sort of thing. No, it is not American biologist. It's like, man. Again, just have to note where most of these things are originating in, right? The vast majority of stuff now originates in China. Like, that's just the reality, and then kind of spreads out from there. But again, these are Russians, so they need everything in the world to be the Americans' fault somehow, because again, it's this whole... This goes back to them being hyper-Christian, right? Where I don't mean that necessarily in terms of them being like churchgoers or moralists. I mean that in terms of them being psychologically Christian, where they believe that there is God and devil. And this is simply the secularization of that concept, right? Where Russia becomes God, all their enemies become the devil. And that is how you should go and understand them, right? Where it's like, oh, anyone who aligns with us is good, anyone who doesn't is bad. And that is, supremacist once more, but this is basically how they conceive of the world. The Chinese conceive of it in a similar way, right? Like their traditional Russia's had this sort of understanding of itself ever since it was Christianized, right? Ever since it came to be. China did not have this idea, historically speaking, but it ended up with this idea basically after communism was instituted. And again, communism isn't a Christian movement in the sense of a theological Christian movement, but it is Christian in terms of its psychology, where it has this sort of God and the devil approach to the world. Very much an apocalyptic idea too, where we're essentially going to go and become the rulers of the world, etc., etc. So all this, you have to understand, flows around of the whole Christian psychology. Anyways.
Без помощи американских биологов?
Я думаю, что вот так огульно заявлять, мы же все-таки должностные лица. Ведь биологическое оружие, если посчитать, какой ущерб нанес ковид, то, наверное, будем говорить, там за...
Once more COVID originating in China.
2 года, да?
Ну, основная такая пандемия 2 года шла.
То даже ее нельзя сравнить с ущербом, который был во Вторую мировую войну.
Yes.
Это в десятки раз больше. Zато выгодоприобретатели той же...
Okay, so I meant World War II was dozens of times greater. Okay. Oh man, sometimes the subtitles are like, okay.
Фармы.
Вы имеете в виду фармацевтические все компании?
Которые в основном находятся...
Once more, this isn't like... How should I put it this way? Like, yeah, there's profit to be made in the pharmaceutical industry, but again, like what was actually the important part of all this is, so what the conspiracy that people have, again, I'm just going to frame it as a conspiracy, okay? Like whether or not you think this is accurate, like, again, I don't personally like put much stock in these sorts of things, but thing that people were talking about with the pharma industry is that instead of having 1 shot per year with the mRNA virus, I guess it's synthesized viruses essentially. So there's basically this entire thing where, okay, basically the difference between what was like a COVID vaccine and a standard vaccine, right, is that a standard vaccine is basically you have a weakened sort of virus in there, okay? And then you inject that, your body basically reacts to this weakened virus, and then it becomes, it gains immunity to stronger types of that viruses, right? So basically this was referred to as an inert virus. Your viral system in your body has trillions of viruses, right? At any given time, and the vast majority of them are inert. So even things that you might not think of, like your body will have probably like a inert smallpox in it, right? Like just there's tons and tons of different viruses that are in your body at any given time. It's just they are in a very weakened state. They just don't really affect you that much. Okay, so that's the general idea behind a standard vaccine. So the difference between that and the COVID vaccine is that the COVID vaccine was using a new sort of technique, which was the mRNA synthetic mRNA. Okay, I'll finally get that out. Which basically is trying to go and replicate a virus without really having a virus. Okay, so basically instead having the RNA is basically the genetic code of a virus, is sort of similar to DNA, but it functions at a different level. It's basically a different type of protein strand. Okay, so basically you want to synthesize this RNA, and then you can go and inject it in people, and then the hope was that will have the same effect as an actual virus, and that your body will go and respond to it without having the sort of effect of an actual virus, okay? Like even in its weakened state. So that was the point, and the thing is that this technique requires, again, it's like the standard virus shot, right? Vaccine requires once a year, maybe twice, and the synthesized type required a shot 3 times a year. So in theory, that could be anywhere from 1.5 to 3 times more profit for a pharmaceutical company, depending upon, again, the pickup in the average population, okay? So that was the profit conspiracy, where it's like, oh, they're doing this so that they can go and essentially get people to have vaccines, 1.5 to 3 times more than normal. Okay. So having stated that, like, is that accurate? Again, I don't think that there's actually a ton of profit in this sort of thing, or anywhere near as much as people think there is, because the reality is that, like, a lot of, like, the medical industry is a very big one, and the actual pharmaceutical aspect of it, like, or the vaccine related aspect of it, is, I don't think, actually that important. Like, because you think of, like, your average old person, for example, like, those little pills that they have, right? Like, they're spending, like, what is it, like $50, $100 on pills, like, sometimes even more, like, every month. And the average price for a COVID or vaccine, right, is like $100, depending on how much of it is covered by the government. So it's like, you're really not actually profiting that much compared to, like, your average pill regimen, especially given the fact that, again, these, like, your average person doesn't really get a flu shot unless they have to. So, and it's no different really with these sorts of, again, COVID. Like, that was a very small period of time where people were obsessed about that, and only a few people are still obsessed about it to the point that they're going to go and get, shots. Like, I never really bothered to get one myself, so anyways, that's, I guess, laying a few things on the table there. But anyways, that the point of this, I'll have to say, again, and I should clarify, like I said, from my perspective, that was a sickness that the vast majority of people who died from it were old. Like, the vast majority of people who got ill from it are old. So it's like, yeah. But anyways, and again, that was several years in the past, so anyways. But yeah, so there's this whole talking point about, the pharmaceutical companies in the US, etc., etc. And it just isn't there. Like, again, like the rationale that it's all being done for profit, just, no, it's not there. It's just not there.
У нас там в Соединенных Штатах это там колоссальное.
And again, like you think about that too, which is that, I talked about the vaccine, right? But the reality is that these companies also develop tons of other vaccines, and, like, again, those vaccines have the same sort of profit margins, right? So it's like, yeah. I think the thing that was, like, the rationale really for the synthesized, RNA vaccines, like, the reality is that the idea is simply that you could go and, I think, more easily deploy them with synthesized, RNA, right? Compared to having to go through the process of, weakening a virus, then going and deploying it that way. Again, whether or not that is something that is successful, well, we haven't seen really the results. I'm not sure if the COVID deployment was actually very successful. Yeah, like I said, I wasn't sure about myself, so anyways. But the point is that to say that's all being done for profit is, no. I really do not believe that this whole, it's all being done for profit is,
То есть вопрос...
Вопрос стоит.
Да.
Вопросы мы задаем.
And again, he talks about the forged documents, so again, that's irrelevant.
Мы же передаем документы. Вот характерна реакция Соединенных Штатов Америки, про которую мы говорим.
And once more, like, if you want the actual truth about the development of this whole thing, you'd have to go to China. And of course, we all know that China won't give you the actual truth about the thing. So, because remember, like, they just want to, again, go and claim that they're the force for good in the world, the only force for good. And then, everyone else is bad. So, of course, they're not going to go and admit to their own mistakes. Because here's the thing, like, there were, like, you'll remember the cases of vaccine injury in the U.S., like, that were actually admitted. Like, there was that case with a bunch of military servicemen where they were literally injured by a vaccine. Then in Europe, you had one, right, that ended up, it was an injection for women. Like, at the time, the Europeans were like, oh, this is fine. The U.S. looked at it. They were like, not really convinced about this. And then it comes out that that was a major thing that was responsible for birth defects, right? So, point being that when there's a big case of there being an issue with vaccines, it usually will come out, if not immediately, eventually, right? So, again, like, the reality is that, like, you don't need to go and, like, spend time if you just go and make up documents, like, of course you're not going to get a refutation. Like the refutation is, these are literally made up. You're faking them. Like, gosh.
По опровержения тем документам, которые мы предъявили, не было. Мы передали документы, это более, наверное, 2.
And once more, it's like, they looked at them, they're like, yeah, this is just garbage, right? So it's like, that's the problem. Like, look at what Alex Jones is doing here. It's like, everything this guy is saying, right, he's taking absolutely uncritically. Like, you'll know, like, again, like, me, what I've done is you've heard it throughout this, right? Like, I've had criticisms of, the West in different aspects, like, around this whole issue, right? Like, but, like, this sort of guy is, like, you're literally hearing a guy who is majorly high up in the Russian military, and you're hearing him go and talk about this whole, like, just put out a propaganda narrative, and then it's like, oh, I'll just go and take that critically, uncritically. It's like,
тысяч листов в Организацию Объединенных Наций.
Какой ответ пришел?
У нас, как правило, 2 ответа. Один ответ происходит в Соединенных Штатах Америки. У них же он стандартный. Все, что не делается, все делается в интересах национальной безопасности Соединенных Штатов. И нам надо доверять.
Слепо доверять.
Да, слепо доверять.
Once more again, it's like, remember, the Russians are inclined to go and believe everything bad about the West, right? So this is what you're looking at here. I don't know how much more point there is to, like, this whole
Там политика глобального биологического контроля. Они поняли, что это работает, что посредством искусственно создаваемых таких кризисов.
Again, once more, like, remember, the virus originated in China, and it was China who went and promoted, like, it was China that was the one who promoted this whole lockdown to go and solve it. Like, that's their idea. So they're the one that caused this crisis, and they're the ones that haven't received blame for it, because there are a lot of China fanboys in the Western world, right, that just go and lie on their behalf all the time. So, and Russia is one of China's biggest allies, and now they're going and blaming the U.S. for China's problem. It's like, and Alex Jones is going to take it and go and say, yeah, the U.S. is the one at fault here, not China. So it's like,
кризисных ситуаций биологического характера можно управлять миром. Ведь ничего бесплатно они не делают. И даже...
Nothing they do for free except going and giving a bunch of stuff away, apparently. Yeah. I mean, if your point is that, yeah, there's always an agenda behind anything that countries give away, I mean, I guess. But it's like, the agenda is to make other people like you. Like, okay. Like,
поставляя каким-то государствам на безвозмездной основе, она не такая безвозмездная, как они об этом говорят.
Our all-time best-selling supplement.
Yeah, we're just... Should I watch the supplement commercial? All right, Alex Jones supplement salesman. Let's go.
Is finally back in stock at drjonesnaturals.com.
Yay.
Vitamin Mineral Fusion. Now, this has all the essential vitamins, all the essential minerals, but what they claim is essential isn't really all the essentials. Then it's got all the...
Even has to be conspiracy theorist ways of like promoting this stuff. Like, gosh. Like, by the way, you just buy the store stuff at, like your average grocery store. It's like, yes, and if you gosh. It even has to be conspiratorial and promoting like freaking multivitamins, okay?
Other key vitamins and minerals and a bunch of different amino acids. And
Dr. Jones. Dr. Jones. Man.
And known concentrates of superfoods, super herbs in it.
Again, you literally just get this stuff at a grocery store. It's going to cost you a lot less than ordering it from Alex Jones.
This was a little bit popular at first. I didn't really promote it when it came out 5 years ago. But then as listeners used it, it became our #1 bestseller. And it's finally back in stock at drjonesnaturals.com.
Dr. Jones, gosh.
Now, I'm about to have the Alex Jones Chat GPT read this because
Alex Jones Chat GPT, all right? So is this like a llama bot that you want to trade for yourself? It could... yeah, never mind.
Some of these names are hard to say, and my AI self can say it even better than me. But here are just some of the ingredients, and then when we talk about the...
So it's just a voice bot that you've got trained? All right.
Concentrates, that's a whole list of their benefits. So here it is.
Also, what is with the dramatic music that's going on in the background here? Like you're hearing this, right?
List of their benefits. So here it is, ladies and gentlemen. Get your vitamin mineral fusion right now at drjonesnaturals.com. It's liquid. You have better absorption and...
Guys, this sounds like really dramatic music for selling a vitamin mix.
And it funds the InfoWar at this critical time. So thank you for your past support.
InfoWar. InfoWar for who? Yeah, that's a very good question.
Support to all the fans that love Vitamin Mineral Fusion. It's finally back. And to folks that haven't tried it, listen to this.
Now here are all of the amazing ingredients in vitamin.
That's not even a good voice bot. Gosh. You couldn't even, like, go to 11 Labs and then go, like, hey, 11 Labs, here's my voice sample. Just go and give me one. No, instead it has to be this, like, robotic stuff.
This.
Now here are all of the amazing ingredients in vitamin mineral fusion.
Like, don't you see that? Like, that's... like how... Like, you can literally create a realistic sounding AI voice of yourself right now, right? Like, literally just go over to 11 Labs. You can go and, upload a sample of your voice, and then you can go and literally have it say, whatever you need to, right? I don't personally, make that use of that feature just because, it's like... I don't know. Like, I'm just getting in front of a microphone now. I'm relatively confident with myself, but I like using 11 Labs for some of my other stuff, like my games, and it basically gives you a way of getting a bunch of different voices and that. But anyways, point is that this is a terrible sounding AI voice. I don't know why you would run with this, but anyways.
Fusion now available at drjonesnaturals.com. It's got vitamin A, which is known to support vision, vitamin C, an antioxidant, vitamin D. It's got vitamin A, which is drjonesnaturals.com. It's got vitamin A, which
does a really bad job immediately saying vitamin A.
Is known to support vision, vitamin C, an antioxidant, vitamin D, which supports bone health by enhancing...
Again, all of this you can just get at your supermarket. Like,
calcium absorption. Vitamin E, another antioxidant. Vitamin K1 helps with blood clotting and bone health. Thiamine supports energy, metabolism, and nerve function. Riboflavin helps convert food into energy and acts as an antioxidant. Niacin.
Again, a reminder, like, just get all this at like your supermarket, like, ugh.
Supports energy production. Vitamin B6 helps in brain development, immune function, and protein metabolism. Folic acid, essential for DNA synthesis. Vitamin B12 supports red blood cell formation and nerve function. Biotin supports healthy hair, skin, and nails. Pantothenic acid helps convert food into energy.
Do I need to also just say that, like, so his rationale for using an AI voice, right, is that he allegedly can't go and say a lot of these words, and yet the AI is messing up consistently. And also, he called it the Alex Jones Chat GPT, where it's like, this is just a synthesized voice bot that you've made. Like, it's not a chat bot, it's a synthesized voice. So it's again, it's like, it doesn't even know what he's talking about here, and it's a bad synthesized voice to boot. Like, what?
Energy and supports the production of.
And by the way, is this like going to go on for another 2 minutes? Because that would be hilarious if that was all the video, but.
Hormones, calcium, of course, which is essential for strong bones and teeth and supports muscle and nerve function. Magnesium supports muscle relaxation. Zinc boosts immunity. Selenium, an antioxidant again, and copper, which helps.
It messed up spelling. It couldn't say copper.
Selenium, an antioxidant again, and copper, which helps form red blood cells and supports the immune system. Now, we also have manganese, supports bone formation. Chromium enhances insulin function.
Chromium?
And molybdenum helps in enzyme activation and detoxification processes. Glycine aids in collagen formation, sleep, and detoxification. Betaine anhydrous supports liver function, cell hydration, and muscle performance. L-arginine boosts nitric oxide production for improved blood flow and cardiovascular health. L-lysine.
See, you know what the problem is with a lot of this stuff too? Is like, this is we're starting to get into the whole list of ingredients that are maybe not as much stuff that you would find in standard supplements, and the problem is that when you go with guys that are this into alternative thinking, right, you have to be very careful, because it's like, this is the point where you might start to run into stuff that can be an issue, right? Where it's like, they think that it's helpful, but maybe it's not actually helpful as they think, and maybe there's a reason why you don't find some of this stuff in, standard minerals and stuff. But anyways.
Supports collagen.
Or at least, like, you have to be careful with certain things, right? Because it's like, even if they're healthy in a certain dosage, it's like, they're only healthy as if your body, needs a certain amount of them, right? It's like vitamin D, right? So vitamin D is good in a small amount, but then it's like, if you're getting too much of it, then it can actually go and, support, like, it basically can go increase the incidence of cancer in your body and that sort of thing, right?
In production and immune function. L-glutamine promotes gut health and supports muscle recovery. Citrus bioflavonoid peel powder complex is...
The heck? Citrus bioflavonoid peel powder complex. All right.
Full of antioxidants that support immune health and enhance vitamin C absorption, and N-acetylcysteine aids in detoxification and supports respiratory health. Finally, we have coenzyme Q10, which supports energy production, along with choline bitartrate, supports brain health. Bromelain complex aids digestion and has anti-inflammatory properties. Alpha-lipoic acid is an antioxidant as well, and boron supports bone health, hormone regulation, and cognitive function.
That's another weird one. Chromium and boron. So, anyways, I used to be fairly into chemistry, but it's like I'm not. Again, I don't have any sort of. I can't do a direct medical critique. I'm sure there's probably someone who's done something of a critique of Alex Jones and some of his supplements, but that would be an interesting one to find. And apparently this was the video. Okay.
Get yours now. Vitamin Mineral Fusion at drjonesnaturals.com.
You cannot.
Again, all of that, like, that was, like I said, the AI voice did not do a very good job there. And it's like, there's such a thing as doing just multiple takes if you really are having trouble saying something. But again, man. Apparently he's too lazy to do that.
Not lose by getting Vitamin Mineral Fusion. It works. It's great. It's so good for you. Every function in the body, immune system, clarity, stamina, libido, focus. It's amazing.
It improves your sex life. Yay. Although, doesn't, just out of interest, like, now, it could just be me, but, like, really, what sort of sex life do you think the average Alex Jones fan has? I'm just throwing that out there, but anyways.
And it funds the info war, so...
Yeah, that's probably the biggest reason not to go and get it. But anyways, like I said, just, for supplements, just go get whatever looks good at your local grocery store, you know. Stuff that's actually been, because probably I'm going to go and say that this stuff has like it has to go and carry a disclaimer on it that probably says, oh, you know, we're not FDA approved or whatever. I'm going to say that is quite likely that it probably has that. But anyways, so you just have to be very, very careful of this sort of alternative stuff, right? Because, like, again, you know, alternative stuff, they'll go and say, oh, it's absolutely wonderful for you. You know, they'll sell you a million ideas about it, but then it's like, sometimes there's a reason why stuff isn't being used in the mainstream. So there you go.
Well, the only way we lose is if you don't take action. Thank you so much for supporting us in the fight against the globalists.
Is this stuff all going to be American sourced too? I that's just an interesting question. Now, you know, him throwing out that little line about the globalists, I'm like, what do you want to bet that a lot of this isn't actually even sourced from the U.S.? Like, a lot of the ingredients in this? I'm just throwing that out there. Just throwing that out there. That dramatic music playing all throughout this, it's just crazy, right? And hold on. So of this video that Alex Jones made, let's see. So, how much of this was congressional testimony? So there's about a minute of congressional testimony. So we're already down to about 8 minutes, 39 seconds. And we have, about 2.5 minutes there, so we'll knock about 3.5 minutes off. So we're down to about 6 minutes, and wow, yeah. Supplement commercial is about a little over 4 minutes long. So that means that there is, in this allegedly Alex Jones video, there is about 1 minute 45 seconds of Alex Jones in it. I repeat that. In this 9.5 minute video, Alex Jones is speaking for about 1 minute and 45 seconds. when he's not doing his little shtick about, the AI, the commercial for supplements, of which even that, is over half voiced by an AI. Just let that sink in, right? Like, again, like, less, like, oh boy. So in other words, that's like less than 20% of the video is actually Alex Jones talking on the subject. The rest is just him showing off clips. And most of his argument was being done by this guy right here. Right? Yeah. Igor Kirillov, right? Like, that's who is doing most of his arguing for him. Just ridiculous, right? Ridiculous. I see that's what they were, like, claiming, right? Where it's like, oh, look at all the biolabs against, like, your average university has a biolab. It's just how big is it, right? Like, what was the actual classification number on it? Because, like, the only ones that are considered to be highly secured are like 3 and 4, I believe. So, anyways, like, who knows, right? Who knows? But yeah. So thank you, Alex Jones, for speaking for 1 minute 45 seconds. And yeah. How much of this was a commercial? Yeah, so 4 minutes 10 seconds of this 9-minute 39-second video was just a commercial for his supplement. Well, that's fascinating. Anyways, so that'll be it for this episode, and I thank you all for listening to it. Yeah. Me critiquing 1 minute 45 seconds of Alex Jones and everything else about the Russians and his job at doing a commercial. All right. Well, there you go. This has been Qatari Lightning signing off.